Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. First of all, I just want to address this as I think it's something that quite a lot of people may be feeling at the moment, and I want to gauge what others believe. Now, trust me when I say as a content creator, the easiest thing in the world is to gloss over anything bad by providing criticism and only just focusing on the positives, as people like to hear positive stuff, not negative stuff. As I'm putting this video together, we've recently heard that Battlegrounds are out on December 10th, and that Phase 3 itself will be coming early 2020. This is a follow-up from us getting Dire Maul a solid month ahead of the rest of Phase 2. All in all, things are happening a whole lot faster than expected, and it's easy to see the benefit of separating content out further from a financial standpoint on Blizzard's side. They're creating extra hype and giving people more reasons to continue or renew their subscriptions to the game. From an outset, it was expected from Blizzard that Phase 1 and 6 would be the longest, and this would have made a lot of sense. After all, everyone is very much aware of the time a leveling takes in Classic, and that starting period should have allowed as many people as possible to hit cap before the gearing process took place. And then the final part of Classic being where everyone can get geared to the teeth and one-shot each other for a while before whatever comes next. Classic WoW released on the 27th of August 2019. The first major content update patch was Dire Maul on the 15th of October 2019. Now, Dire Maul isn't exactly a leveling dungeon, especially West and North can be challenging even at 60. That's a whole 45 days between release and the first content patch. It should also be noted that Dire Maul makes a whole lot of other dungeons obsolete as well, further hindering those who are looking for groups who have not hit level cap yet. In fact, if we put the average playtime for level 60 around 8 days played or 192 hours, Blizzard would have expected each player to have played a little over 5 hours a day consistently by the time Dire Maul dropped in order to be capped. This seems way over the top as an average expectation, and 8 days played may even be far little to consider as well. Following this, we've had the Honor system and the rest of Phase 2 release on the 12th of November 2019. Open world PvP around a month after Dire Maul, and less than 3 months after the release, we're already well out of Phase 1, something that by all accounts, especially if looking back to the actual timeline of Classic, could have lasted 4 or even 5 months. In the timeline of Vanilla, Dire Maul and World Bosses came out a little over 3 months from release, and the Honor system a little over 4 months. So you may think, okay, we're a bit ahead of schedule here, but I'm not seeing the issue. Well, here's the kicker. Warsong Gulch and Alterac Valley were brought out about 6.5 months after release, giving Vanilla a full 2 months of world PvP. We're getting Battlegrounds 1 month after having the Honor system introduced. For us, it will be less than 4 months from release to Battlegrounds. On top of this, and as mentioned earlier, we already have confirmation for Phase 3 in early 2020, which I can all but expect to be 1 month after Battlegrounds are out, to be honest, whereas Vanilla didn't get this content until nearly 8 months after release. I think that world PvP has really lit a fire under Blizzard to act and try and get people out of the open world into Battlegrounds. And despite that many people look fondly back on world PvP, it really hasn't played out how most people have envisioned. In fact, I think it's been the single largest factor driving people away from the game, and I am not surprised in the slightest that Battlegrounds are coming out this early. Servers are far larger, busier, and the people at the top end are far more competitive and experienced at the game. I believe a lot of people have rolled PvP servers who shouldn't have done so as well. And it's not a case I'm bashing you for having a job or real life commitments. In fact, I wanted to warn as much as I could what life will be like with the Honor system enabled in my setting expectations video for the exact reasons many of you now may be experiencing on PvP servers. Getting into 1v1s, fighting tactically around terrain, pulling off outplays, I think is what too many people expected, when instead we have consumables, 1vx, and the spy add-on. So honestly, this is the first time when Blizzard has brought a content update early that I understand, and to be fair, will probably be for the best, whatever I think personally. But what will it change? How many of the dozens of people who have to make several res runs into Blackrock Mountain to get into a dungeon are thinking, you know, I'm loving this, I'm happy this is what I chose, compared to those who are thinking I'm leaving as soon as server transfers open, or just straight up quitting, thinking this isn't worth my time anymore. Server populations are so large, you can bet there will still be PvP roadblocks at certain points, as there'll be less competition for honour outside in the open world once battlegrounds are up. And it's not really a victory for either side in the long run either. Imbalance will only continue to grow further and further, leading to the most poorly balanced servers cannibalising themselves until they're practically PvE. And if you're a majority faction on a PvP server, you'll basically never have the chance to experience a more even faction server. Paid transfers themselves may be on the table eventually, and quoting from the Reddit AMA, once players reach higher levels, also discussing the implications of players moving to a new realm, which I think are pretty clear to see. And this unfortunate extreme imbalancing has already happened to a few servers. Artseeker is about 80-20 Alliance favoured, similar story with Pagel. Stalag is about 30-70 Horde favoured, and many of the Alliance realms on PvP are 60% or more Horde favoured, and that 10% is equal to a huge amount of players. This combined with Blizzard opening up transfers around the time the Honor System released, and you can bet server minority players fled to pretty much anywhere en masse, making the imbalance even worse on the cusp of the Honor System. The one saving grace of being on a faction minority server would have been battleground queues being instant, but Blizzard decided to make them server wide. However, do you think more Horde or Alliance players are leaving the game at present? This combined with there simply being a whole lot more Horde players overall, queues on Horde might still be pretty slow. Now, I know someone's going to say it in the comments, so I'm going to address it here, that streamers are at fault for this. There's a grand total of one streamer constantly followed by a raid non-stop, and you all know who that is without me saying the name. Others that are with small groups often, like friends or other streamers or guild members, kind of like how a normal person would play as part of a group sometime. Larger streamers even went to the same server and tried to balance popularity with faction on Fairlina, which pretty much means that server is fair game to be a complete mess in my opinion. It was never going to be normal with all the outside influence, not just in terms of faction, but in terms of people following others around for different reasons than normal. But for literally every other server, no. Streamers have nothing to do with any imbalance at all. And whether people rolled a faction because of guild, friends, the faction they prefer, or racials, which I honestly believe is the biggest factor in people's choice of faction, the actual speedrun status Classic has gone to factions being imbalanced is insane. Let me draw a comparison with retail. I don't remember when the first tier to cause this was, but for a long time in retail, Horde racials were strictly stronger in PvE. Blood Fury, Berserking as a mini Bloodlust, Rocket Boots for goblins, so on and so forth. People at the top end started going Horde to min-max or simply compete for rankings, gradually leading to many top guilds and players making the swap, which over time has led to a Horde-dominated PvE scene in retail. Say what you want about a World 2000 guild trying to copy a World Top 10 guild, but it's undeniable that there are more high-quality recruits on higher population Horde servers. Trust me, I've been there. In Classic, Horde racials are far superior in PvP. Will of the Forsaken and Hardiness are nuts in terms of power level. How many undead and orcs do you see compared to other races on Horde? And Alliance racials are by no means bad, they're just not as good. And these days, people really care about min-maxing. Story time again. Back when I was first starting WoW as a strapping young lad, I'd previously played RuneScape, and all I did in that game was PvP. I love PvP, and I intended it to be my main focus in WoW too, and it was. Now, without going into detail, in RuneScape there's an area of the world dedicated to PvP called the Wilderness, which works exactly the same as free-for-all zones like the Gurubashi Arena, except it's a huge portion of the map. So I was essentially used to playing a PvE server, and when I came to creating my character on WoW, I thought to myself, being able to be attacked anywhere sounds really annoying. Sometimes I don't want a PvP. I want to go train, I want to go make gold, I want to chill, you know, I don't want to have to constantly be on guard. And so I rolled PvE, and I was pretty happy for it. This time, in Classic, I rolled PvP. Maybe young me was right after all. Saying that, with the population of the servers, it's not really the same, is it? As a solution to this, well, there isn't really one in the spirit of Classic. It is what it is. If you aren't happy, take the free transfer or re-roll to a different faction. Both tough choices. Personally, I'm going to stick with my choice. When I say there isn't a solution in the spirit of Classic, there is a solution: sharding. In case this word means nothing to you at all, I like to think of it as the opposite of layering. Layering aims to separate people out to accommodate a massive player base. Sharding aims to bring more people onto the same shard or zone to make the world seem more alive, and it's also across certain server groups. If it could be applied to Classic to balance the number of players in zones, not sure how realistic this being implemented is, and can only imagine the new wave of issues I'm not anticipating, but I don't think it will happen. People simply won't be open to a change that huge. What about the pacing of the content though? This is something I think we can have a bit more of an interesting discussion about. And just to remind you, we're currently getting Battlegrounds on the 10th of December, about 3.5 months from release, compared to 6 months in vanilla, followed by Phase 3, which is, by the way, half the content in the game gone by early 2020, so probably about 4.5 to 5 months after release. What is the cause for this rush? Are Blizzard accommodating the top percentage of players who eat up content in a matter of weeks? Are they giving streamers more to do? And I've always found this to be an interesting opinion, shall we say? Or is it something else entirely? Before Phase 2, there was little gain from PvP, and before Phase 2.5, there were no Battlegrounds. Now, driving out content in this manner is consistent with vanilla in terms of format, that's for sure, but maybe retrospectively, it hasn't been for the best in 2019, an era where the average player knows so much more about the game and the player base is massive compared to the old days. What would life have looked like with Honor, Warsong Gulch and Alterac Valley on release? Leveling would have been more of a pain, there's no doubt about that, but you're already earning Honor from an early level as well, which would be pretty cool to be fair. People wouldn't have really used Battlegrounds during leveling as well, they don't give any experience by default. The marks you earn from them do, however. Maybe it would have just been too much of a mess for all good cross-faction zones to become Taramil versus South Shore at peak times, but how long would have this lasted for? Would it have just gotten us to where we are now, but a little bit faster? Except once people start capping and the battleground queues are acceptable, people wanting the most honor will surely swap over to those a lot earlier, making the outdoors a bit more bearable by now. Classic without Battlegrounds does feel like it's missing something for me personally, and this could very much be the reason for the rush. This feels like Blizzard want us to have something to do constantly, something to aim for. In retail, and no, this isn't an offhand attempt to throw shade at retail, okay, keep your eye on, there is always something to do. It may not be what you enjoy, but the repeatable content is there. Arenas, Battlegrounds, Mythic Plus, collectibles, achievements, reputations, pet battles, there's so much to do. There is one person at this point who I believe has completed all the achievements in WoW retail. Maybe there's more now, I'm not really sure, but how insane is that? One person over all the years. In Classic, you get your prebis, you raid, you do your professions, you farm gold, and there are collectibles, but bag space makes it kind of a pain to do, and there's PvP. So what do you notice about these? Not so many are repeatable. Content in Classic very much has an endpoint. That's the nature of the game, and honestly that's okay. It feels as though people are hitting that endpoint, stopping playing, and Blizzard are noticing it and saying, oh well, okay, we need to put something new out now as numbers are dropping off. If we keep up at this pace, Naxxramas will be done before the end of 2020, and Classic would have been burned through in little over a year, compared to vanilla lasting near 2.5 years. And that would be a real shame. I realise this is all pretty heavy stuff, and people generally don't like talking about this. I tried to be as reasonable as possible in my assessments, but when you care about something, personal bias is inevitably going to make an appearance, so try not to take this too to heart, okay? I'd really like some input on what you guys are thinking about pacing and world PvP too, whether I'm miles off and you have some different ideas around what's causing issues, or whether there aren't any issues at all. And as a final note, you may think, well, I'm glad I roll PvE, and fair play to you, but the future of the game really does depend partially on popularity as one of the metrics, so this does matter for you too, just to a lesser extent, let me know. And as always, thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. If you like what you see, give the video a like and subscribe as there's plenty more to come. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Take care. Bye.